I got a travel pillow that I probably won't entirely use. I'm ready to go, man. I'm missing my family up in the CMI.
Well, hold on just a sec, Jake, because you might hit a couple speed bumps in your travel plans. As I believe the CNMI still has very stringent quarantine policies in place. Hey, look at that. Who's in the Zoom room right now? Kevin Bautista, the CNMI governor's office. Just, yeah, real quick status update on that, Kev. What is the current quarantine policy for inbound travelers, both residents, non-residents, to the CNMI?
Gotcha. Well, good morning, Chris. Good morning, Jason. And buenas tardes, Guahan. So on the update on the quarantine procedures, yes, the quarantine procedures still remain for non-residents of the CNMI. It's still a $30 fee for quarantine, but we do have a modified quarantine procedure for CNMI only residents who have been fully vaccinated, who have proof of vaccination, particularly if they have proof of vaccination from within the CNMI. And we're continuing to modify the quarantine process as we go along. But travelers that are CNMI residents, excuse me, have to apply online 72 hours before arrival, show a valid proof of COVID-19 vaccination in the CNMI, have an arrival interview, have their application reviewed, and any site assessment for the 5-day quarantine, and then agree to the modified quarantine terms.
That's for residents.
That's for residents.
Okay.
For non-residents, it still remains the old policy of about $400 per night for quarantine.
What about non-residents traveling into the CNMI who are fully vaccinated?
So that policy, it's still subject to approval by our territorial health officer. So that discussion still remains. We continue to be in close contact with our territorial health officer about that, who was the CEO of CHCC.
Right.
So that continues to be an evolving discussion. We hope to eventually expand the policy where fully vaccinated individuals can avail of the modified quarantine.
You know, there's a story I saw out of Hawaii. Hawaii will ease restrictions for vaccinated travelers, starting with inter-island visitors. I know there was a lot of talk about this Guam, Taiwan bubble, but what about, because I know there's a lot of people who do business between Guam and the CNMI who, obviously, that's a little difficult to do if you got to go into quarantine. But has there been any discussion at all between our governments about the possibility of some kind of travel corridor involving Guam and the NMI?
Specifically for a travel corridor, those discussions haven't been made about creating a travel corridor between CNMI and Guam. But in terms of the essential workers that are navigating between Guam and CNMI, that has been going on. That's been going on for several months already, actually. Since Guam and the CNMI has eased restrictions since the latter half of 2020.
Right.
So we've had essential workers being approved for a form of modified quarantine, in the sense that they have to go through the essential worker status application approval. They have to go through the screening upon arrival, the testing upon arrival. The vaccination portion, that policy continues to be worked on by CHCC in coordination with our COVID-19 task force. But yes, the discussion continues to be made in terms of just having that corridor set in terms of expanding it beyond essential workers. That hasn't been made yet.
Can you give us some idea on exactly what classes of workers are deemed essential by the NMI government?
So we just like with the Guam government, we get our guidance in terms of how we define essential workers through the Homeland Security cyber infrastructure guidance. I believe I forgot what it's called, but I remember the acronym is called CISA. And going off that, we use that as a guidance for designated which workers are essential to travel to the CNMI. For the most part, most of the essential workers that are coming to the CNMI are federal workers, or workers from the various agencies involved in the COVID response, namely FEMA, HHS, some CDC officials. We do have some officials that have come in for military projects, such as DoD, especially with the ongoing auxiliary constructions that are going on in Tinian to complement the long-term goal, which is to divert airfield on Tinian. So we have a bunch of DoD officials, some Navy Seabees that are going in and out, that are going to Tinian, so that that's coming in via the essential worker status. And then as well as specific businesses that are authorized under CISA that are considered essential. So we have a lot of businessmen that have businesses here in CNMI, in Guam. So those individuals, when they go through that essential worker application process and then they get approved, they'll have modified quarantine.
And is that an application that has to be done with every single trip that's taken, or is there anybody who gets like a blanket exemption?
No, we do it every trip. We do it every trip through our governor's website, and then CHCC vets those applications before they arrive.
Where are you guys with the vaccination efforts?
So as of April 25th, we have vaccinated about 45.6% of our eligible population. We've ramped up vaccine rollout on Saipan, Tinian, and Rota as well. So we look to expand those numbers within the next couple of weeks, because we have a pretty big schedule of vaccine distribution the next couple of weeks.
Are you guys resuming use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or did you pause use of it?
We have paused the usage of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We actually announced it immediately after the CDC and the FDA made the announcement. I believe we announced it first, and a couple hours later, Guam announced the pause later that evening on that day. We understand, we're monitoring the fact that the CDC and the FDA are in talks right now to initiate the continuation of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine sometime soon. But we continue to be cognizant of the fact that we are listening to the science. We're focusing in on those reports of the blood clots. And thankfully and fortunately, we haven't had any reports of blood clotting here in the CNMI. But we will continue to focus on the prioritization of the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine to get people vaccinated. And so far, that part's been working. And I think rightfully so, though, like with the Johnson & Johnson pause, just like where everyone else in the country, I don't know if it is the same. I think there was a report on Guam that said the same thing, that vaccine hesitancy went up a little bit because of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine pause. But the messaging that we've been putting out essentially has been focused on making sure that we've paused it. Pfizer and Moderna continue to be the primary vaccines here in the CNMI, and we're going to continue to do that safely until otherwise authorized to do the third vaccine by the FDA and the CDC.
Right. We had a comment here. For those who are granted essential worker status, do they still have to quarantine? I think you answered that, and pay the fee of $100 for essential and federal workers.
So they would be, it's a modified quarantine where they would be in their hotel room, not our quarantine sites, but their actual hotel room.
Right.
And then adhere to a strict policy of them only going to their work site. So let's say it's a meeting with a Commonwealth government official, like the governor's office, for example. Then they would only be authorized to go from the hotel to the place of work, and then go back to their hotel until that modified quarantine period is lapses.
Kev, here on Guam, there's been a lot of debate and dissent, really, about how this 600 some million dollars we're going to get from the American Rescue Plan is going to be divvied up and spent and given out, and what types of relief, where it's going to go, basically. And so what it's kind of led to is, well, there's been a couple pieces of legislation about it, but then now the governor had wrote a letter saying that she wants to sit down with our senators to kind of game plan and get their input on their priorities list on what this huge federal relief package should be spent on. Are there similar discussions happening in the NMI? And then also, like, how much are you guys getting?
Thank you for that question, Chris. And it's an excellent question because it's definitely something that we've been talking about for the last several weeks since the enactment of the American Rescue Plan. The truth is, for us, just like in Guam, the Governor Torres is also dealing with some pressure from our legislature about the spending priorities for the American Rescue Plan. But the caveat here, though, is that since the beginning of the planning phases of the American Rescue Plan for that for us it's about a 515 million to about 560 million pot of money for that state government allocation. The governor has reached out to the Speaker of the House, to the President of the Senate, early on in the process to gauge their priorities, to talk to the respective chambers, because the governor, again, wants to focus in on respecting the legislative process, talking to the presiding officers directly, and then having them engage those discussions. There has been legislation put in place by the House about wanting to appropriate the money locally, but then we've had the opinion of our Attorney General, our Public Auditor, and our Secretary of Finance that federal funding cannot be appropriated locally by our Commonwealth legislature. And again, it goes back to the CARES Act. In the same vein in the CARES Act, we received $36 million for our state government allocation, but then the spending plan was approved and authorized by the U.S. Department of Treasury from the governor and our Secretary of Finance submitting that plan. So we're doing that through the same way, but at the same time too, because it's a large pot of money, large pot of funding for several priorities, we're gauging the legislature's interest from early on through the presiding officers, and also even talking to the autonomous agencies as well that don't necessarily have the purview of the governor's executive branch. So we've actually had a meeting last Thursday talking to all the cabinet departments, all the autonomous agencies, in addition to these other conversations that the governor and the lieutenant governor have had with the legislature to continue setting these priorities. And so far, our spending plan, is looking good so far, and we should be able to submit. We should be able to get that plan approved by the U.S. Department of the Treasury very soon. We anticipate them coming back to us soon about the plan.
Sounds very similar to what's happening here.
Yeah, very much so. And you know, obviously, we understand the dialogue with when it comes to something like this. But at the end of the day, I think for us, the main thing for us was we did gauge legislative opinions about spending plan early on in the process through the presiding officers, and the presiding officers have been in those meetings early on about this.
Right on. What about you guys' stimulus? Is that heading out already, the STEMI?
Yes, definitely. The stimulus checks were approved the same time that Guam was, and on that first Monday following the approval of the expenditure plan, we immediately sent out checks via direct deposit and to all three major banks here on Saipan, Tinian and Rota, Bank of Guam, FHB, and Bank of Hawaii, as well as the other local banks that we have, like Bank of Saipan and Bank Pacific. So our stimulus check rollout has been going very smoothly. Most of our direct deposits have gone out. Most of our paper checks have gone out, and so far people have been really happy. Our streets are busier, our stores are busier. I think it's a good thing to see that, given the fact that we've been hit hard economically. But I think when you started, people have gotten a lot nicer over the last couple of weeks since the stimmies came out.
People have gotten a lot nicer. Oh, day. Okay, Kev, anything in closing you want to add? Kind of got to run.
Yeah, I want to bring this. I know the question wasn't posed necessarily, but I wanted to just bring this discussion for viewers on Guam, just because I know that some people there was a considerable amount of interest from Guam about this particular issue that happened last week in our legislature regarding Article 12
Yes.
here in CNMI.
Right.
If you wanted to talk about that,
Yeah,
Chris,
we did. We did kind of talk about that. So I know that when we last spoke, you weren't really
Yes.
clear on what the administration's stance was on
Yes.
it. So,
I did talk to the governor about this, as well as also following the Senate public hearing that happened last week, and we just want to put it out there. The governor and the administration has made it clear that land is a sacred thing here in the CNMI. We understand that out of jurisdictions in the Pacific and even native tribes in the United States, the CNMI has a very unique position as debated and negotiated in the covenant to protect its ancestral indigenous lands from foreign ownership. And that has been one of the defining features of our agreement with the United States. And for the governor, for the lieutenant governor, for the administration, we understand that land is sacred. It's a personal issue. Last week's public hearing is indicative of that passion that not only the citizens of the Commonwealth have shared, but also with the fact that the governor and lieutenant governor have shared the same sentiment too. So in terms of our administration's official position on this, we do not support the abolition of Article 12, because I know that that's kind of been discussed in certain channels.
Right.
But I think what the public hearing did show us, though, was that these discussions, these democratic political discussions, talking to your lawmakers, talking to your elected officials about an issue that matters to you the most, it's good for discussion. I think the discussion that we had last week, where we had a public hearing that went on through about 9 p.m. last night, 9 p.m. that evening, is indicative of the fact that people are very passionate and caring about the issue. And the administration's position is that we want to keep Article 12, but we want to be able to have a discussion where we could expand the ability for NMDs to make the choice about their land. And at the end of the day, that is that is part of why our understanding, why the Senate president who introduced the legislation put that up for discussion, is to give NMDs, Northern Marianas Descent, that opportunity to have freedom to do what they want to do with their land.
Thank you for that, Kev.
No problem. But for the governor and the lieutenant governor, as proud NMDs, no matter where they go, we know that what we have here in the CNMI is special. We know what happened in Hawaii, and we even see a little bit of it. We see a little bit of that same type of dialogue happening on Guam. In the CNMI, we have something pretty special in the sense that we were able to fully have ourselves locked in with the land.
Right. So, Kev, just for clarity, the CNMI governor's office does not support the abolition of Article 12.
yeah, we do not support the abolition of voting.
Okay. Well, thank you. What a great close there, Kev. Thank you for that. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Chris, as always, man. It's responsible.
And have fun spending that STEMI. Got to say with me, STEMI. Does Governor Torres say STEMI or does he say stimulus?
He says stimulus.
Okay.
He probably says stimmy to his kids, though.
Right. Kev, thanks. Appreciate it, my friend.
It's responsible, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks, Jace.
Yep, definitely appreciate him coming on. You know, considering the time difference there, a lot of times it is a little different for.
But I got a funny story about like this.
Okay, make it quick because we got to play Link on Location.
The CNMI, when I was playing for my former volleyball club, right, there was a guy from the